What is up, everybody? Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, and the host and co-producer of monthly online conversations for fathers that are co-produced by Dove Men Care and Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And as always, you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. It is hot like fire today in Toronto. It's July 6th. It is really hot, and it's only getting hotter because we got a hot new friend coming up on the Dr. Vibe Show tonight. And also big shout out to BIA Media, who are raising the bar and amplifying the Dr. Vibe conversations, epic conversations. I'd like to say thank you very much. As I mentioned, we have a new friend with the Dr. Vibe Show tonight, Desmond Williams. I'm telling you, this guy's bio, we could spend half this conversation just talking about him's bio, but he's going to fill in the blanks. I'm just going to say he's a teacher. He's an advocate for higher and better learning, and he's passionate especially about higher and better learning for Black boys. So let me just go over some quick highlights. He's a career teacher, principal, author, and thought leader. He received his bachelor's degree in English literature from Howard University in Washington, D.C. He later received his master's degree in education and human development from George Washington University. He's written a book called The Burning House, Educating Black Boys in America. He also founded and launched Nalinka Solutions. And we'll get to that also about Nalinka Solutions, but their goal of Nalinka School Solutions is to help children achieve their dreams one solution at a time. In all, he has spent 9 years as a teacher, 7 as an administrator. And however, his greatest satisfaction is seeing kids maintain their enthusiasm for leaving their mark on the world. So let's welcome to the Dr. Vibe Show, home of epic conversations, for the first time and not the last time, Mr. Desmond Williams. How are you?
Doing well. How are you? Good night, sweetie.
That's a great intro. I've never had an intro like that before.
I'm doing well, good brother. It's my daughter's bedtime like 20 minutes ago. But
well, she wants to see Daddy's a star tonight. So she wants to see Daddy in real time.
No, she's a habitual insurrector. So that's what she does. She's like, I think they're live now. Let me go downstairs.
Habitual insurrector. I gotta make sure I take that down and I use that on somebody. They're gonna, where you get that from? Desmond. How is Desmond?
Yeah.
How are you, my good brother?
Brother, I am well. We are healthy and thriving, and we are making the best of a bad situation. So we have no complaints. We have some crooked places to make straight, but we have no complaints.
I receive that. We got to take care of it and take advantage of the opportunities, no matter how they show up.
Yes, sir.
I gotta say, and people, there's a little backstory. Desmond and I were first introduced by a common gentleman, David Miller, back in early April 3rd. And he immediately reached out to Dr. Vibe, say, hey, I'd love to come on your show. So it's gone back and forth, and I wanted to have the right look for Desmond before he came on the Dr. Vibe Show, and even more so for my series of conversations called Black Men Talking, where we're having one-on-one conversations, getting a Black man's life story, journey, etc. That's why I wanted to wait for the right time, right place, right look for Desmond. So I'm glad and I appreciate his patience during the journey, but he's here now and hopefully he's going to come back. So
absolutely.
Desmond, good. Let's start. Let's get the particulars. The bio was great, but it didn't say where you were born, how you grew up and all that. So let's fill in that cup.
So I am a proud native of Detroit, Michigan. I grew up was born and raised in Detroit. I had the opportunity, I'm dating myself here, but in 1995, while I was in junior college, because I just had really poor grades, in 1995, I came to Washington, D.C. for the Million Man March. And I said to myself on October 16th, I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be a benefit and to be an asset to my people. So I actually had already been accepted at Howard University earlier in 1995, but I had to defer because my father was sick. So,
Oh my.
yeah, my father had a double bypass in August of 1995.
Can I just interrupt you there? We've got a number
Mhm.
of things in common already, other than being Black men. First
Mhm.
of all, Howard University. My father's a graduate of Howard University.
Awesome. I don't know if you could see that.
Yeah, I see that. HU, the Bisons.
You know.
And also too, when he went to Howard, one of his teachers was the late Toni Morrison.
Wow. Wow. Isn't that awesome?
And another thing, unfortunately, our fathers have in common. My father is a survivor of a quadruple bypass.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
what's even more interesting, his older brother, who passed away about 6-7 years ago, he was a survivor of a 7 bypass. And he lived for about 15 years after a 7 bypass heart operation.
Mhm. Isn't God good? It's
He's
like,
great. He's great.
yeah.
So so going to Howard University, am
Mhm.
I right in saying that your family stressed education?
In a word, yes, they did. Both of my parents were what we would call working class. My father worked for General Motors in Detroit for about 37 years. My mother is still a hairdresser slash cosmopologist. So, you know, school was always very important. My father, quote unquote, matriculated at Oklahoma State off and on for about a year and a half. And one of the things he said to me is, if I wanted to go to college, it was something that I should do, but it was always be an asset to your people. My father was always reading. He was an avid reader. He was reading magazines. He was reading books. He read the newspaper every day. The first thing I saw my father doing every day was reading. So formal education, yes, but also this notion of be self-taught and be self-made, because you're not going to get everything that you're supposed to get within a K-12 school setting, or even within a quote unquote K-20 setting. So education was definitely stressed, but I think more so for that, looking back, um, thinking critically and thinking for yourself and having a capacity to do for yourself are some of the things that my parents instilled in me.
Nice. Are they both still alive?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yeah, getting on each other's nerves during the quarantine. But yeah, yeah.
So what do you thank your parents for?
You know what? I think they were, that's a whole nother show, but I would say um, setting the appropriate example, um, putting me first, you know, like I was an only child, but I was always the center of all of the decisions. And it's very easy to not do that, especially when you're 17 and 22 years old, like my parents were. Um, my mother, when she needed help, she asked for it. My father, when he needed help, he asked for it. And sometimes they had to go outside the house and ask other family for that help. But I think giving me a strong spiritual foundation is also something that I'm very grateful for. And they taught me to be proud of my heritage, and not to look at myself as being second class or second fiddle to any one group of people. And I remember making tons of mistakes as a child, and my parents being very forgiving of those mistakes. And I don't mean, I took the car and stole the car and ran off with a girl or things like that. But, just poor grades, some poor decision making. But it was always, that's what a 16 or a 17-year-old is supposed to do. and this is a parental response to that. So I think those are some things that I'm most thankful for them for.
Why the decision to go to Howard?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. While I was in junior college, I always knew I was smart, right? I actually thought back then, I thought I was brilliant. But when I was in junior college, I suffered from what some people call imposter syndrome, meaning I had such a horrible experience in high school and academically that my confidence was kind of broken, and I was rebuilding my confidence while I was in junior college. The only schools I ever really wanted to go to were Michigan and Florida State. And really, that was because of college football and
Seminoles and the Wolverines.
Yeah, so those were the schools, and I remember just being in the library. It was it was the Friday before Columbus Day in 1993, and I remember being in the library at Henry Ford Community College, and I just picked up what was called a transfer book. Like, these are some of the schools you can transfer to. And it was a book that was yay thick, and it was all black and white, and it said Howard University. And I thought to myself, it would be nice to go to school on the East Coast. And again, I didn't get into Michigan. I didn't apply to Florida State. I applied to Howard, and they accepted me. And I said, that's the place that I'm going to go. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. But I said that was the place I was going to go to school at.
How was your experience at Howard?
It's awesome. I don't really have the words to describe it. I'm actually working on a project with a good friend of mine named Sharon Porter, where she has a HBCU fundraiser where she's asking alumni of colleges to write about their experiences. And I had to condense, Dr. Vibe, I had to condense my 3.5-year experience at Howard to about 900 words. And it was extremely difficult. But I would say I did everything at Howard that you could possibly want to do with your undergrad experience, with the exception of traveling abroad. It broke a lot of stereotypes that I had about Black people being a monolith. I met many people who were 3rd and 4th generation college students. I met some people that you and I would call rich. I met some people who were loafers. I met all kinds of people. But I would say it reaffirmed my belief and my pride in Black people. And it's not something you can put a price tag on.
When you graduated from Howard, what was your next step?
So it's funny you asked. I actually started interning November of my quote unquote last semester at Howard, and interned from November up until April, and was offered a full-time job before quote unquote graduation in May. So I started working at a nonprofit organization here in DC that was dedicated to closing the digital divide. So I was a program director for that organization. This organization that's now defunct, called Kids Computer Workshop, but we, wrote a lot of grants and did a lot of work with inner city children, teaching basic computer skills, working with parents, teaching them computer skills, resume building, coding before it was an actual thing, and then helping teachers bolster academic success and academic achievement for children by giving them apps and CDs and different activities that they could do with students to engage them academically and socially. So that was kind of my start in kind of being in the service industry.
Right.
And after 2 years at KCW, I ventured into teaching full time.
When was the moment you made the decision or had the feeling that teaching would be your life journey?
You know, it wasn't a watershed moment. I talk about I discuss in a book at length a traumatic experience I had with my freshman English teacher, and how I was an A student from kindergarten up until the middle of ninth grade. And at the beginning of ninth grade, I let a teacher define and redefine me, and it completely devastated me, even though I didn't know it at the time. I just stopped trying. I graduated from high school with a 2.01 GPA. And, you know, when I came to Howard, I said, you know, I think I want to be a lawyer because there's no way I will ever be broke. And I said, you know, but I kind of want to be a teacher because I think I could be really good working with children. I had two aunts who were teachers, and a few other family members who were teachers. So I would say about halfway through my second semester at Howard, before spring break, I said, you know what, I'm going to fully go into working to be a teacher. But it was a series of things. There's some things I kind of left out there. Some really good experiences I had at the university in terms of tutoring and working with students that helped tilt the needle. And then meeting some people who were lawyers who were absolutely, Brother Vibe, they were absolutely miserable. that kind of tilted me in the other direction, because there was an opportunity, even working at KCW, where I had taken the LSAT and I had applied to law schools.
Oh, wow.
And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to do this program that's going to help pay for my master's degree. So yeah, I was kind of, you know, going back and forth, you know, kind of a Prince and Michael Jackson thing. You got to pick one.
Good analogy. Great analogy.
Yeah.
Great analogy. What did your parents want you to go down, the lawyer route or the teacher route, or they just said, you know, do what you feel is best for you?
You know what? They were very hands off. They were very hands off. My father's point was, I can't pay for it. That was my dad's point. But he said, you know, do what will make you happy. And my father paid for my undergrad by borrowing against his 401k.
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty diligent. When I arrived on campus, I had about $4,500 in my pocket that I had saved working part-time. And I said, Dad, this is going to pay for a semester of school. What are we going to do come January? And this is on a car ride to DC, right? He was like, just give me all the money you got. Just give me all of the money you got. I said, okay. And essentially what he did is he bankrolled my first year.
Right.
He paid for it. He gave my mother the $4,500. And that was an allowance that they gave me like my first year and a half in school. But in terms of, you know, the decision, my parents didn't care one way or another, so long as it was something that I wanted to do and it was a decision that I made.
I love to celebrate success, no matter how big or small. Can you recollect the day that you graduated with your master's degree?
I can. And there's a few stories in that I can. And, you know, it wasn't a big deal at the time. And the reason why it wasn't a big deal was because of my experience at Howard. And it goes to show what happens when people have skin in a game. And I got accepted into a program here in the States through what's called the New Teacher Project. And it's very similar to Teach for America. and they paid for about 80% of my master's degree. And what had happened is I'm at this amazing university. George Washington is still probably one of the top 20 school of educations in the United States, but it didn't matter because I really wasn't paying for it. And I, said to my parents, "Are you guys going to come for graduation?" And they said, "If you want us to." And I said, "Yeah, I don't think I'm going to walk." And literally the
Oh, no.
occasion went by, and I remember like looking up a year later and thinking to myself, I just finished a master's degree with zero debt. And that's just not something that happens.
Okay, can you repeat that again for the audience? Like, now I'm going to date myself a little bit. When I graduated from university, I graduated with zero debt. I actually worked on campus because I said to myself, if these people charging me this money, they're going to pay for it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you never know what you have, and you have blessings, and you take them for granted, and then you look back when you get a little bit of wisdom and you say, that could have only been the grace of God. And going back to the internship that I had at Kids Computer Workshop, my boss, who's a dear friend of mine, his name is Darren Kinley. He was a former Teach for America alum, but he was doing consulting work for the New Teacher Project. And after my interview and everything, he said, "You know what, Desmond, they really like you, but you're not going to get in as a regular ed teacher." He said, "If you choose special ed, they will let you into the program," because there were four departments. It was regular education teachers, special education, secondary, mathematics, and then English as a second language.
Right.
He said, "If you pick special education, I can guarantee you'll get a slot in the program." So Kids Computer Workshop and Darren's relationship with those people essentially got me into grad school and got me into DC public schools, and the rest is kind of history. Yeah.
Nice. I have a question, but I'll parking lot it till later. So I'm just going to say the experience in the DC school system. When you first got in, how did you handle that? Or did you know what you were? Did the expectations meet what was going on, or was there a little of an adjustment?
It was a lot of adjusting, Brother Vibe, and it was a different professional experience than having been a program director. I didn't realize the target that was on my back as a young Black male educator.
Okay, I want you to stop right there. So, how many other young Black male educators were in your presence at that time?
That's a good question. This is a school with about 550 children. It was an elementary school, about 65 staff members, no young Black men.
How did that? How did you handle that?
You know what? I was just myself, and we had a lot of young teachers. We had a few white male teachers, but I would say 90% of our building was, about 70% of our building was Black women, and another 20% was white women, and then that other 10% was white males and Black males. But my principal was a Black male, a gentleman by the name of Timothy Williams. But he was, Mr. Williams was old enough to literally be my father. and our custodian and our head counselor were also men who were old enough to be my father. So we had a lot of young female teachers, but the only young Black male teacher. It was, and truly, in terms of young white male teacher, there was another gentleman, but we were the only two like knuckleheads, if you will, teaching.
So was that what you were expecting, or was that a little bit of a shock treatment for you?
So I can't say it was, I knew just in my experience that I wasn't going to encounter a lot of Black men. What I didn't know is how much support I would get from the sisters in my school. And I know, when you talk to Black male educators now, they have a lot of horror stories around, I was treated this way, but I had a lot of support. But I also was a student. My planning periods, I was in teachers' classrooms observing. I had a mentor teacher by the name of Miss L. Brown, who was consistently working with me to kind of help me up my pedagogy. I was always smart. I wasn't messing with the female teachers or getting caught up in any of that kind of extra curriculum stuff that gets people caught up in the workplace. I minded my own business. I got to work very early. But when it was time to go home, I went home. I wasn't very social. And I think in my naivety, that kind of created a certain perception of me that I was really serious about my craft, which I was. But the notion of, you're a Black man on an island, it really wasn't a thing because I felt that I had so much support. And then there were other things that were happening in the building to help with the young Black boys that we had in our building. So I was able to plug myself into that as opposed to creating something on my own. I think you're on mute, good brother.
Okay, got a question here from Henri Morris, who's been a supporter of the Dr. Vibe show for years and years and years. And he's got a question. How can you as a Black male educator inspire young Black men to go into being an educator?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Morris. I talk about this extensively in my book. You're not a teacher, you're a nation builder. And we have to give educators their due credit. And you can be in Toronto, Canada, you can be in America, you can be in North or South Korea, anywhere in Asia and Europe. But when you look at education and its function, it is designed to help people solve problems so that they can self-preserve themselves. Education is designed to solve problems so people can self-preserve themselves. And that is the main issue with education for Black people, really across the entire globe who've been colonized, is our education is given to us by white people. So we are centered in whiteness, and we're literally comparing ourselves to the mores, the folkways, the cultural norms, the standardized testing that is emblematic of white culture. So what I tell all Black educators, whether male or female, is that you are engaged in a process of nation building. You're not teaching math, you're teaching people, but you're teaching people to nation build so that we can protect ourselves and so that we can solve the problems in our community. And I think when you couch it like that, you take these young brothers and sisters who are 22 and 23 years old, or who are on the verge of deciding what they want to do in college, it makes it much easier for them to make a decision between, do I want to be an engineer or do I want to help build a nation? Like, though, it changes the inflection point and the vibe, if you will, of the conversation.
Nice. Reflect on your experience at that school that you were at, and why did you choose to leave it?
Oh, great point. Well, great question. Part of it was I thought my principal, Mr. Williams, was going to leave. And, at this point, I was about 4 years removed from college. And as we say, what was happening all of my friends were turning in their Nissans and their, 1988 Cutlasses. They were turning them in for BMWs, and they were driving some really nice luxury cars, and I was still walking. So I ended up leaving that first teacher appointment to go to another school because of the money, right? Money was a driving force. Going to this other school gave me the opportunity to take on more responsibility. I was a bigger fish in a smaller pond, but ultimately it gave me the opportunity to put more money in my pocket and be more of a help to my family, and change the trajectory of my career.
Was that the all boys school?
No, the all boys school was much later. I went to work at a school for children with special needs, and I worked
Yes.
with students who mostly court adjudicated, who were labeled quote unquote emotionally disturbed, have been kicked out of traditional schools, and were sent to us as an alternative.
Now let me just, if I can just interrupt, Desmond.
Mhm.
Did you know what you were getting yourself into, because you were leaving one type of environment,
Mhm.
and some people say you did a 180?
It was a complete 180, but I would say I knew what I was getting into in terms of the type of students I was going to be working with. But what I didn't know was the impact of, and I didn't really have the term for it then, the impact that white supremacy has on schools. And we were trying to make a better way for these children, but they were coming to us with pathologies and issues, emotional, economic, familial, that were all rooted in issues that had nothing to do with who they were as students. But we often quote unquote dislabel Black children. Oh, the mom has two children, she has two jobs, she does the best she can, but this young boy um, has too much time on his hands. He has to make a lot of decisions on his own. He's resentful of the fact that he has to fight in his neighborhood all the time. So, he's not presenting well in school. So let's label him emotionally disturbed. Or let's say that he has a conduct disorder, or he's defiant and he doesn't like authority, when really a lot of those children need hugs and they need counseling, but they also need familial systems that are not broken by the white supremacy and the housing discrimination that impacts major urban areas across this entire country. Like, that's an entirely different conversation. But in my experience, I knew I was going to work with students who were court adjudicated, and I had got kicked out of other schools, but I didn't know I was going to work with students who were extremely intelligent, that the system had given up on. I didn't realize that was really the issue, that the system had given up on those kids because they were too much to handle in a typical school setting.
Right. Comment here, Squeaky G saying, as a teacher of 24 years, I would not recommend most Black males go into teaching. It is a calling, declining benefits, declining job security, and a plethora of things that will end your career early. What are your thoughts on that, Desmond?
I would not recommend people go into teaching because of declining benefits. Well, I disagree with that. I disagree with that. I do think there's something to be said for a war on education as a whole and a war on teachers. But I believe that maybe that's a viewpoint that you can have if, in fact, Black people across this entire planet are not at war. But I do believe Black people across this entire planet are at war. So we have to think like that. So given that what I would just call major premise, I would not say that people should deselect because of declining benefits and pay and things like that. Because what does that mean for our children? Right? Because they're still going to go to a school, right? School is not, despite COVID, school is not going anywhere.
Right.
So I think we have to be more strategic, thinking about the short term, but also considering the long-term impact on the decisions that we make in terms of what happens with the amount of people that we place in education. So I strongly disagree with that statement.
Okay. I want to know what your second position when you were at that school for the special ed, how did that mold you into becoming a better educator, that experience?
Wow. So about halfway through my first year at this second school, which was called the Center for Life Enrichment Academy, I became a quasi administrator, and I was handling the load of being a special education coordinator and then still teaching full time. And it taught me a few things. I learned that I was working at a school that was using Black children. There were law firms in the district that were suing DC public schools. And when they sued DC public schools, they would pluck the kid out of his neighborhood school and send them to a school like us. And the child would stay at the school with us until the child's family went to court. And some of the children we had did not belong in our school. DCPS had done some things wrong from a paperwork standpoint. We didn't have this meeting on time, or we didn't conduct this assessment on time, things of that nature. But it would be difficult to say because this assessment didn't happen. This child should be taken away from what we would call non-disabled peers and sent to a school with children who have these issues, right? And one of the things that I discuss in the book is that when you put all of these different behaviors in a setting with poor academic and behavioral expectations, kids come out with behaviors that they didn't have when they went in. So, it was a very eye-opening experience.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing it taught me was to go against the grain and stand up for children, which is, can I tell a quick story?
Hey, it's your show. I'm just steering the ship. You're driving it. Go for it.
What had happened was I'm a huge rap fan.
Okay.
And I grew up listening to KRS-One, and I get lost on YouTube a lot, Brother Vibe. And KRS-One was on Cannon's class. And I think that episode is maybe a year and a half old. And one of the things that he said to Nick Cannon, he said, there's no real advantage or there's no benefit to telling the truth on this planet. And I was not listening to the podcast. I was doing whatever, and it was just on. And when I heard that, it immediately struck me. And it just reminded me of a cascade of memories I've had trying to do the right thing, standing up for children in professional spaces, and being ridiculed and being scorned and being ostracized, which was the complete opposite of my first 2 years of teaching, because everyone wanted to stand up for kids and everyone wanted to do the right thing in my naivety. But that was one of the things that I learned at that second school when I moved into an administrative role, that people politicize disenfranchised groups and they use them for their own capitalistic gains.
Why did you go into administration?
I got pushed there.
Okay.
I got pushed there. It's one of those things where, you know, you have this nerdy guy who's squeaky clean. He shows up to work. He's the first guy in. He's one of the last guys out. He's not involved in any of the banter. He's a student. He wants to learn. He's studious. And you get pushed into administration as a Black man because there are not a lot of us. And there's certainly not a lot of us who want to be, well, that's not true. But from in my estimation at the time, there weren't a lot of us who wanted to be the very best. So let's take Desmond and move him along here. And you know, I wanted it because I thought I was ready, but I also wanted it again because, again, you know, I remember hanging out with some friends and we were going to a picnic, and, you know, a good friend of mine who was maybe 7 years younger than me had just finished undergrad, and he pulled up in a BMW. And I was like, man, you know, this fire engine red Jetta is not cutting it anymore. And I say that jokingly, but you always think about what is your worth, and if I stay in this space, will it lead me to where I want to go? And if opportunities come along, should I take advantage of those opportunities? And when I first came into education, I didn't necessarily want to be a principal, but I thought I had a lot to offer.
Right.
And I thought I had a lot that I could give to teachers, particularly around engaging students, being out of the box in terms of our thinking, but also in terms of making an environment where people want to come to work, where people enjoy the people that they work with, they enjoy the students that they work with, and they feel like they're contributing to something that's bigger than them. That cultural thing was a really big deal for me, because when I came into education, or even the odd jobs I had in junior college and working at Kids Computer Workshop, like, I enjoyed going to work. And to me, those are the types of, that's one of the chief responsibilities of an administrator or a principal, is to create an environment where children are safe, children are first, but you proxy yourself through the adults, and the adults love and enjoy the environment as well.
Nice. Another question, another comment here from Squeaky G. I respect Mr. Williams' opinion. I have a very long list of Black males whose career were ruined in public school. Would only recommend for the most sincere people with a mindset similar to Mr. Williams. So Squeaky G is hailing you up, my man.
Would only recommend for the most sincere. Well, I agree with that. I would agree with that. But the question is, were their careers ruined because they weren't fit? Because they didn't necessarily have the instinct or the passion for it? Because if you don't have the passion for it, you shouldn't do anything you're not passionate about.
Fully agree with that. I fully agree with that.
So I think my question would be, like, what do you mean by ruined?
Right.
Because I have a passion for the NFL, but if you put me on the field for the Toronto Argonauts,
how you know about CFL football?
Well, I grew up in Detroit, and
okay, true. Yes.
In the summers, waiting on this time of year, waiting on the NFL
to start CFL
football.
football.
I was all about the CFL.
Okay.
Tuesday nights.
All right. Respect, brother. Respect. I love that. Loving that. Now, it sounds like the experience at the special ed overall was a good one, but you decided to leave that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What reason and why to an all-boys school?
Yeah, financial collapse for the school. And I actually left and went and worked downtown for DC Public Schools in their Office of Special Education. And very interesting experience. And I was kind of a field agent. I worked at multiple schools at once, working on compliance, helping doing professional development for teachers, things of that nature. But I got to rub elbows with a lot of principals, and it made me want to be a principal because some of these brothers and sisters, they just made it look so easy, to the degree that I was inspired by some of the work that they were doing in their buildings. And of course, it's not easy, but some of those principals were so good that they made it look easy. So, I worked in the office of special ed for 3 years. And after that, I transitioned and became a principal at a school for children with special needs. Yeah.
Wow.
So the experience at the Bishop Walker School, the all boys school, was the latter part of my year. I started there in 2014. Yeah.
So, and again, you were there for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when you came in, the reading scores were averaging, they soared to 64%. Then in the second year, they went to 83%. Mm-hmm. But then you left.
Yeah. So let me say this. We weren't even collecting data on students when I was teaching there. I had data on where my students started the year, what happened in the middle of the year, and what happened in the end of the year. But we had to figure out who we wanted to be. And a big part of my task was bringing all of these pieces on a chessboard together to attack the other king, if you will.
Yep.
So putting things in place where we could be a data-driven school was like number 2, right? Number 1 was just loving our boys. But 6 years is a long time. And my first year was as an I may have said in my bio I was a principal. That's actually not true. I was a division director, which essentially is an assistant principal. And I didn't necessarily want that job. Our head of school said, "You know what, Desmond, I think you would be really good for this. You really love the kids. You've been here for a long time. I think you should apply." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then when I became a division director, Brother Vibe, I loved it because it was a really small space, a really intimate community, and I just enjoyed it. But then what had happened was, as the kids said, our head of school quit. And they said, "Desmond, you be principal." And I was like, "Oh." Because then being a division director shielded me from the politics. And you're talking about a very political situation because it was an Episcopal school, it was a private school, it was a tuition-free school, and it was a school with all Black boys. So you had all of this, what I would call intersectionality. And from my perspective, the biggest thing was the fact that it was a school with all boys and more specifically, all Black boys. So I was hell-bent on making it look like a school for Black boys as opposed to a school with Black boys. But my wife and I had our second child, where we were pregnant with our second child, and the distance was kind of a thing. So it just kind of made sense to kind of bow out. Unfortunately, my predecessor, the person who replaced me, only stayed for a year and a half, and the community really liked her. And we kind of hoped that she would, plant her flag and stay for about 7 or 8 years. But that wasn't the case. But I say all of that to say, I left it much better than I found it. Yep. So 2 years seems like a very short stint. But in terms of some of the things we were able to do and some of the things we were able to accelerate and building the school's profile and creating a space where not only were Black boys were learning, but they felt like when they left us, they could go out and conquer the world. We did a lot of good.
Excellent. Squeaky G is just following up with you from the question you asked and saying school leaders change. New principal comes along who has little trust in black male teachers. Black male teacher all of a sudden getting low evaluations, targeted setup even. So he was just following up on what you had asked him.
It happened to me, brother Squeaky G. It happened to me. And going back to the KRS-One quote, it can be very difficult. And I found this out at my first stint as a principal. Black men can be very intimidating when they care about kids. It's like, wait a minute, you actually want to do like what's on the job description? Like you're not in your office on the phone. You're working to evaluate teachers. You're talking to parents. When you have strong opinions, it can be very intimidating. And what I found was in interviewing for other jobs after that, oftentimes, and I think Squeaky G would agree with me, you almost have to, I don't want to use the term code switch, but you kind of have to temper yourself because you want to prove yourself to be worthy of the position, but you don't want to over intimidate the people who are interviewing you. And that is a real thing. And I have been targeted. So I am not disagreeing with him. I'm not disagreeing with him at all, but I would say that happens in all fields with black men and women.
Right. So how did Nalinka School Solutions come into being?
So what had happened is upon leaving the Bishop Walker School, I had some contacts and a few principals in my hip pocket who I thought trusted me. And what I really wanted to do was quote unquote expand my reach and really dig deep into what I thought was a utopia that I created at BWS. We had approximately 23 staff members. It's a very small school, about between 95 and 100 children. And of my 9 classroom teachers, 7 of them were black men. My kindergarten teacher,
Nice.
my kindergarten teacher, and 6 were black men. My kindergarten teacher, my second grade teacher, and then my 4th and 5th grade math teacher were black women. But my music teacher, our PE teacher, our media specialist, myself, and head of school were all black men. And I remember my first year working there. There's like a new teacher dinner, and it's women at the table and it's men and women at the table, but I'm the only male there besides our head of school, and we're talking about whatever we talk about. And then you fast forward 5 years,
yeah,
and I'm principal, and my head of school, a gentleman by the name of James Woody, who actually just retired, it was all men at this table. And he said, and we were talking about, because it's September, we're talking about the start of the NFL season and who's going to do what. And my head of school said, ain't no women at this table. He said, is this going to work? And I said, yeah, because we hire people who can teach.
Ooh.
And more importantly than that, I think I hired people who love black boys. So, that being said, I wanted to expand that reach to say, the things that are inhibiting our progress in schools is something we can fix. You can hire black men who are competent, who understand pedagogy, right? Who want to be better. You can do those things and they can produce for you. So that was kind of the inception of the work that I'm currently doing.
Nice. Fantastic. That is really good. Let's find out a little bit about the book, The Burning
Mhm.
House, Education Black Boys in Modern America. What's the
Mhm.
story behind that, and why did you decide to write it?
So I started writing the book at the beginning. Well, I would say in my 5th year at the Bishop Walker School, when I literally first became principal, and I had attempted to write a few books before that, but essentially I said, you know what, this has to be chronicled, and there was a larger story that I needed to tell, and I found out working at the Bishop Walker School that a lot of what I had been taught about education, particularly for Black children, more specifically for Black men, was absolutely incorrect, and that it was given to me by uh, white Eurocentric educators and white Eurocentric educational psychologists who didn't center Blackness or Black children in their work. So I was on a path of rediscovery, and what I found was I was very complicit in harming lots of children that I had served. And I wanted to um, aid Black teachers and white teachers and all teachers from being complicit in the destruction of Black children. So that was kind of the premise of the book. Also, helping to unearth racism and its insidiousness in our schools, because as you know, you can see on the news uh, this white teacher beat up this Black child, but those are not the stories what we're hearing in the news. It is the bias. It is the systems that are centered around whiteness. It is comparing Black children to the cultural norms of Eurocentric America that ultimately creates the racism that disenfranchises Black children, boys and girls, that creates that racism. But we don't see it as such as white teachers, because if I am a white teacher, that's how I learned. So I'm going to teach you Stephen Crane, and I'm going to teach you The House of Seven Gables because that's what I learned. And those things are important because look what it did for me. And there's nothing wrong with that if we're not in a pluralistic society, right? And if I'm studying, you know, Piaget and Freud and Kohlberg, of course, this psychology is the backbone of modern civilization. But what do Black psychologists have to say about the teaching and the education and the psychosocial development of Black children? And why isn't that in our textbooks, particularly in teacher training programs and at the college level? So I was on a path of rediscovery, but one of the things that I try to do, Dr. Vibe, in the book is center these Black voices that have been silenced and squelched over the last 40, 50 years and bring them back to the forefront. So I could say, you know what, it's not just me. Have you heard of this person? Have you heard of this person? And literally paint a picture of, you teacher have been miseducated like I was. This is what you need to do to get out of it so that you can create a better world for Black children.
Nice. Squeaky G's asking, wow, 6 Black male teachers? What region is Mr. Williams in? What region in the U.S.?
Well, let me say this. Approximately 2% of the teachers in America are Black men. But in Washington, D.C., which is where I live outside of D.C. In D.C., Black male teachers are about 8% of the teaching population. And I would say that's because people just love the district. A lot of people want to live in the area. It's, you know, bustling and vibrant. It has a nice nightlife. It's warm. So I think a lot of young people are attracted to it, and a lot of people like to start families here. So we have a little bit of a hike in terms of we're a little bit up on the national average. So, but working at an all boys school, you know, you have people who are attracted to the mission, and they're not hard to find. What I tell principals is, if they are hard to find, um, you have to go find them, because in the NFL they say, "Oh, good quarterbacks are hard to find," but they get drafted every year.
Yep.
So what are you doing to find them, right?
Okay. You didn't get a chance, but I want you to just tell a little bit about Nalinka and how did that start, and what does
Yeah.
School Solutions do?
So we are I'm a one-man army. So when I say we, I'm talking about myself. But we specialize in helping schools help Black boys by breaking instructional equity, thinking about how Black children learn best, thinking about how boys learn best, putting culture at the center of the work. I do work with helping schools to rethink their behavior modification systems, putting restorative justice at the forefront of everything that happens. I also do leadership training and basic strategic consulting. Like, you are a school, you are a school district, we are having problems with X. I help problem solve around those issues. Right now, I'm working on a couple of webinars because we are dealing with the pandemic, to provide professional development for teachers, particularly early childhood teachers, on the teaching of reading in these in virtual spaces, so that children are not passive learners. We also have a few other webinars that I'm working on called White Teacher, Black Student. So, we're just trying to get fire to the people, but in and of itself, we help schools meet their mission statements. So that's us in a nutshell. But the name Nylinka, I boasted from a young kid who lived on my street when I was a teenager, and not to go fully into the story, but he loved cars, and he said he was going to start a car company called Nylinka.
Okay.
And I said, I was outside of my house, and I was waiting for some friends to come pick me up so we could go shopping, and he was playing with Matchbox cars. And when he said the name, I said, "Man, that was dope." And that was in, that was in 1990. And needless to say, there is no Nylinka car company. So I took the name because it just represents the dreams of all Black boys and all human beings. We all have dreams that we aspire to, and we all have the capacity to bring those to fruition if we are planted in fertile soil.
You have been involved with the education system for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
From the time that you entered into the education system to now, has it gotten better, worse for our Black boys?
Mm-hmm. It stayed the same. It is. So here's what I say, and I'm not a historian, but racism is a virus. It adapts to its host. The Jawanza Kanjufu wrote The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys in 1988, in the mid to late 80s, if I recall. And, he gets poo-pooed now, but when you read his work now, the data essentially is the same. Approximately 12 to 15% of Black males in America in 4th and 8th grade are reading on grade level. When you look at the dropout rates, those have decreased. But high school graduation by no means is a moniker of life success. So from my perspective, all of the hard work and the advancements that African people make across the globe are going to be met with resistance. So I think to some degree it's not about whether it's gotten better or worse. It's how are African people adapting to this virus. And what I believe has to be done and more earnestly is we need to be working to create and own and manage more schools where we take control of the education of our children. I think that's the only way that it will move the meter and get marginally better. I mean, precipitously better is if we are in control in the management of the education of our children, where we decide these are the standards of success. These are the teachers that we decide we're going to hire. This is our Black agenda, and this is what we want education to do for our people, given our political and education and social agenda. And then you can hire who you want. If you want to hire a teaching force that's 90% this or 80% that, you can do that because they're operating under an agenda that you created. And if they disagree with the agenda, then they're not in line with the mission, and those people can be let go. But I think ultimately, it's static, right? And in Faces of at the Bottom of the Well, Derek Bell talks about racism being a permanent fixture in society. And that should be liberating for Black people because you know what you have to do. You continuously have to fight. And when I read that, I said, man, did he just say racism is not going to go anywhere? And I reread that and I said, this man just said racism is not going anywhere. But it actually made me feel good because the flip side of that coin is you're not going anywhere. Keep fighting. And I think that there's a certain amount of liberation in that. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Another conversation, Pete, we're going to start winding it down here. Mm-hmm. This has been quite a year. COVID, racism, Black Lives Matter, white supremacy. What if, and the state of the education system and how much the gaps in it have been amplified, especially when it comes to our Black boys and our Black girls. How do you feel this has impacted our young Black people? How has it? And also, how will it affect them when they go back, hopefully they'll go back in September?
How has it impacted them? I think they want to be in a driver's seat of change. They don't want to be in this position when they're my age, when they're fighting. I think they're much less comfortable with the statement that I made, right? They don't want to be fighting these same fights. But I think on the other hand, in their knowledge and in their power and in their earnest, we have to give them the wisdom to understand that some of the things that are happening right now, and I'm speaking particularly of what's happening in America, they are symbolic changes, right? You're potentially changing the name of the Washington Redskins, and you're tearing down Confederate monuments, and you're painting murals of Breonna Taylor and Black Lives Matter, right in front of the White House. Those things are non-structural changes. They don't end teachers referring Black boys for special education. They don't end police brutality. They don't end the systemic issues that we continue to see. There was this brother in Atlanta, really, really quickly, Brother Vibe, this brother in Atlanta, Rashard Brooks, who was killed. I was listening to the press conference from his attorneys, and his attorney said that the police officer who shot him broke 3 laws. We have more than enough laws on the books to protect Black life. So this notion of policy and legislating away hate is actually non-cipher. As it's one of my favorite rappers says. This is an issue of morality, humanity, and spirituality. And if we don't really talk about those things, then I think that has a negative impact on our children, because you and my generation have not done what we need to do to prepare them in terms of what I said, in terms of wisdom, prepare them for what is to come. Because they'll look up and say, you know what? We changed those laws. We did this, we did that, and we're still here, right? We need new institutions. We need new structures by people and ran by people who are willing to do the hard work to make sure that those old systems don't start reinventing themselves in other places and spaces.
Nice, nice, nice. All right. I think on that note, we're going to end it, because I think you just, as we say, dropped the mic on that one. That was good stuff. Last comment here, Squeaky G says, right, we need some of our own schools. Love Mr. Williams. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Squeaky G.
Yeah. Any final words you'd like to share with our audience before we let you go, sir?
I would say we are in this together. I remember Malcolm X saying, they don't beat you because you're a Mason or elk, or because you're Baptist or Episcopal. They beat you because you're Black. Like, we're international right now. And I think this is an opportunity for African people to galvanize themselves, because we are 80% of the planet are people of color. So how is it that the minority is able to call themselves a majority, and the majority readily calls themselves a minority? We have to get back. We have to get past these divide and conquer tactics. And I think a good way of doing that is to stay in communication, but build coalitions and build businesses and build organizations where we can continuously put pressure on the system, and then put pressure on the people who perpetuate the system. So I think that would be my final note. Like, we have to deal with the spider web, but we have to deal with the spider who's weaving the spider web. Kill them both. And I don't mean that literally, but let's get rid of them both, the spider and the spider web. Because if you focus on the system, the spider is going to go back in that corner and do what he does. So we need to be thinking about new systems and starting from scratch.
Nice. Great final words. And Squeaky G, thank you so much. You've subscribed to the Dr. Vibe channel. I didn't even ask you. It was because of Mr. Williams, not because of me. So that's a good thing. How can people get in contact with you?
Yes, you can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nylinka. That is NYLINKA.org.
He's got it.
If you want to, you can reach me on LinkedIn at Desmond Williams. If you want to purchase a copy of the book, go to nylinka.org and go to the products tab. The book is doing really well. It's tons of suggestions on what we can do in schools, but it is really a referendum on critical race theory and how racism impacts schools. So I will sign a copy. I'll drop it in the mail for you, and you'll be better for it.
All right. Good stuff. Well, like to thank Mr. Williams. He's ready. LOL. Squeaky G says, yeah, he's ready.
Yeah.
He's ready. Absolutely.
I was a teacher. You come prepared. Come prepared.
I love it. I'd like to say thanks to Squeaky G. Thanks to Henry Morris. Thank you, everyone who watched this live on the replay. Definitely support this gentleman. He's doing outstanding things. And this conversation is already, I always think future ahead. Coming up in September, I'm gonna have a conversation with Black male educators, and I hope that Mr. Williams can join us. I had one a few months ago with the gentleman, Dr. Paul Miller and Dr. Marvin Thompson. It was amazing, and I would like to get all of you together and let's have a little bit of an evening summit online about Black male conversation. Hey, Nicole Waldron, thank you so much as always for your support. But yeah, get you all together. I am Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the...
Shout out to you, Dr. Vibe.
Yeah, my pleasure too. Shout out to you, Henry Morris, too. 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I am also the host and co-producer of monthly online conversations that are co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization, and Dove Men Care. And Nicole is saying here, please include how single Black moms can support their sons. So you know what? We're gonna bring Desmond back. So Desmond, got to come back. We got Nicole asking here, how can single Black moms support their sons?
I talk about that in a book. Nicole, if you purchase the book, there is a State of the Union address that you can have your son do every year. And your son is you're going to treat your son as if he were a country. And the two of you will assess him in terms of economics, in terms of his affiliations with other people, in terms of transportation, in terms of everything that makes him a little nation. I've done that in some summer groups, and I've given it to parents when I've done workshops on raising Black boys. It is absolutely excellent. You do it every year on your son's birthday, and you compare where he was the year before to where he is on this particular birthday, and then you game plan on how you are going to get from point A to point Z. So again, the Burning House, Educating Black Boys in Modern America, the State of Union address, and it'll give you some very good tips, Miss Nicole, on what school can look like for your child and helping you navigate those spaces.
Wow, Nicole's going, wow, big time. There, yeah, there you go, Nicole, right there.
Just go to the products tab.
Nice, excellent. I'll finish off my signing off here. So, website VibesHOW.com. As always, I end off with this: live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. I'm just gonna ask to put up on the screen. There's a link we're gonna put up on the screen that if you can, there's a little short survey I'd love you to just go through. If you click on that link that's showing on the screen, if you're watching this live, you can just copy that link, little short survey just to find out how we did, what can we do to make it better, to amplify it more, and if you want to receive information from the Dr. Vibe show. So, as always, live your life as a dream. Sometimes you have to live your life as a dream. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider, and block assumptions. Thanks to BIA Media. Thanks to everyone who watches live on the replay. God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and walk good.